So welcome to Chicago, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Oh, wow,
thank you
so
so much.
I want to start, Jalysa, we have to know about all this, like cyber warfare stuff. Like,
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I did teach at one time an active FBI agent, and that was pretty cool, but this is different. This is really special. So tell us about your Air Force career and how that happened and then it transitioned into writing. And
I cannot confirm nor deny anything that I say. No, I'm kidding.
can you tell us any classified information?
I do have a top secret SCI clearance that is still active, so no.
We'll talk later.
We'll talk later. When I went to undergrad, I went to the University of Virginia. I come from a military family, so when we were like, how are we going to pay $20,000 in college tuition? My dad was like, try for a military scholarship. So I did, and I got it. Went to school, did ROTC, commissioned as a second lieutenant at 22 years old. Did that for about 5 years, learned how to hack people. So if you need a favor, I got you. And was just involved in that. I was stationed in Italy for 2 years. I was stationed in Montgomery, Alabama. I was actually there when President Obama came there for Selma. And I saw him like land, and everybody was excited, and it was pretty cool. But I've always loved writing. Writing has always been a passion of mine. I did writing electives in college. I got my MFA in UC Riverside as I was living in Italy. And Anna Hosian, we went to school together. She's a professor here. So it was always a thing that was there. And it wasn't until I went to that MFA program where they were like, no, you can make a living as a writer. Go to Hollywood and be a TV writer. And I was like, yeah, that's easy, right? I'll just do that. And no kidding, 2.5 years ago, I got out of the military, went to LA, and now I'm a staff writer on Grey's Anatomy. So,
awesome.
It's crazy.
And this season, they will have their 300th episode of Grey's Anatomy.
Episode 7, for all you Grey's fans out there, is the 300th episode. And we started production on it this week.
Cool. Well, before the show, we were backstage talking about my favorite Grey's characters. So we went down a long list because most of the people I love are dead. So we're interested to see who survives this year. And whether you have a hand in those deaths or not. So
I know the deaths.
Yeah. Oh well, but you can't tell us. And we know that you won't tell us because you're good at not telling. I'm adept at that. Okay, good, cool. So Jen and Sarah, you guys went to film school as undergrads, so you had to have known really early in your life that I want to write movies and television. It had to have occurred to you, because to apply to the USC program and to get in, it's a pretty rigorous process. So when and how did this sort of occur to you, and how did you choose to pursue it so early?
I didn't really. I actually applied to a lot of schools for international relations. I wanted to be a diplomat a few times a year. I still do. But I also applied to some film schools, and shockingly, my mom was into it. I think she understood what my skill would be, what I would do for a living. So I ended up applying to some film schools, and when I got into film school, I felt like it was too cool not to do. So that's how I ended up with a BFA in screenwriting. But yeah, I sort of told myself that all of the other things I was interested in are things that I could write about, so I wouldn't sort of have to let them go. But yeah, it's interesting, to sort of choose what you'll do ostensibly for the rest of your career when you're 18. Mm-hmm. It's pretty crazy. So, but yeah, I sort of didn't grow up feeling like I loved movies and I saw a lot of movies, but I didn't feel like I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to make movies. In high school, I did a lot of journalism, and I was into that. But certainly when I got to USC, there were a lot of people who were like, I've been writing screenplays since I was 10 years old, and that was never me. But I feel like there's a place for everyone. There's lots of people doing this who didn't go to school to do it. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And I kind of always knew I wanted to be a writer, like from a very young age. And I always just sort of assumed, oh, I'll do like books or whatever, which, you know, ironically I ended up doing. Yeah. But then when I was about 14, I won this contest and had this play that I wrote professionally produced. And it was just this amazing experience to see like actors saying your words. And I was like, oh, like I think I'm good at this. Like the parts I always liked about writing were like coming up with the story and writing the dialogue. And I was like, oh, that's scripts. That's much easier, and there's this whole marketplace of like people watch movies, people watch TV. So I was like, oh, I'll go down that route. And then, you know, ironically, the first thing that ended up breaking through was this, you know, young adult sci-fi novel. So, you know, after all this time being like, oh, I'm going to avoid writing the prose, now my editor's like, so, you know, you have to like add some description, like you can't just say the story and the dialogue, and
So it's been hard to expand out.
So it's been, yes. So that's been my learning experience.
So what surprised you about the journey? I mean, you're all, you know, relatively young writers at the beginning of your careers, and things have worked out pretty cool. So what surprised you about this process of getting on staff and getting in the room and beginning a writing career, Jalysa?
Just when opportunities will come to you is probably the most surprising thing. Because you do the writing, you get the samples, you make sure your work is amazing, like not just good, but amazing, and you have all that, you go out and you meet people, and like you never know when an opportunity will present itself, but you have to be ready for it. And so that was the biggest thing that surprised me. I fully expected to come to LA and to put in my dues, right? And putting the time and effort and like have it be years before I even get that first break. So I was actually surprised how quickly it came, but it's not quick, right? Because you're there, you're in your room, you're writing your characters, you're getting notes, and you're doing those notes, and you're getting more notes and doing those notes. And so you never know when the opportunity might come, and you don't know where it's going to come from. So just be ready at all times.
Okay. Jenna? Surprises?
Yeah, I would say actually it was a pleasant surprise to me that it's especially in TV as a writer, because you're also a producer, there's so much more than writing. And I actually really like producing. I like being on set. I like post. And so it was, as someone who is sometimes a reluctant writer, like sitting down to type, I was pleasantly surprised by how much else there is that's part of the job that isn't just sitting in front of a computer and writing. So there's sort of like, you get, especially in television, you sort of get to be part of the entire process.
Can you expand on that reluctant writer beat there?
Well, sure. I was talking about how I went to school with people who sort of were like, I've known forever that I wanted to write, and I also, I think there were a lot of people in our program who felt like the characters are speaking through me, like it just pours out, which is never how I felt. Sitting down and hammering out pages has always been like torture to me. It's going well. And it's funny, I prefer writing prose. That to me is where like the joy of writing comes in, which is really something that most people don't care about in screenplays, because it's not translating usually to the screen. So I think in that sense, like, I don't think I'm ever excited to be like, now it's time to sit down and write pages. I love writing outlines, and I mean, because that's
so different.
I'm the only one, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as someone who sort of came into this and then realized, sometimes this isn't always the parts that I love about writing, it is great to sort of be like, but there's a lot of other things for me to do and things that I really enjoy doing. So,
Sarah, what surprised you so far?
I mean, I think just the extent to which TV writing is such a group effort. Because, you know, you sort of know, like, okay, there's this many writers on the staff, and, you know, you assume everyone sort of has a certain contribution. But, you know, anytime I'd worked on a group project, you know, there's always that group project dynamic where it's like one person has this vision and the other person has this vision, and there's a lot more sort of conflict. But in television, there's much more of an easy way of resolving it. There's sort of a hierarchy, and it's like, you know, this is the person who's in charge, and you're all sort of working toward their vision. And, you know, you have deadlines, and you have to meet them, and, you know, it's a much smoother process than I would have, like, if I were just designing it from scratch, knowing nothing, have been able to put together.
Okay. Well, so let's assume that in the next few years that you're all able to call your own shot and run your own show, which I assume for television writers is the end game. Well, for all writers, really. I mean, nobody has more power as a writer than a showrunner, really. I mean, playwrights and showrunners, right? So, Jalysa, what world do you want to work in? What's interesting to you? Where would you like to go?
In television?
Yeah.
Can I just be Shonda Rhimes? Can I just have her career?
You can do whatever you want then, right?
Because I think that's the end goal right there,
right.
having multiple shows on TV.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge nerd. I'm a huge genre fan. And so if I could write in like a sci-fi or an action-oriented space, that would be my dream. Okay. And writing that, I'm actually developing a pilot in the world of cyber warfare. So
Sweet.
Fingers crossed, maybe I'll be writing in that space.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And what's a compelling backstory, too? I mean, do you find that, are you developing it with executives?
No, just my manager. But we're going to try to sell it based on my background.
Right. I would expect that lends a lot of credibility to the story and that the curiosity amongst executives.
Oh, totally. Like, I feel like all my meetings that I've gotten is because one executive called me a unicorn. And she said, "You're black, you're female, you are a veteran, you did cyber warfare, you work for Shonda. Are you queer too? Like, can we just check all the boxes with you?" Like, and I was like, "Oh, well, I just, am I a good writer? Like, is that why?" And so, like, I think a lot of my initial meeting is because it's a unique, they haven't seen a black female veteran before. And so I think it was that. And then they found out, oh, yes, you can write as well. So, hopefully I get to, like,
well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then in terms of science fiction, like, are you hard sci-fi or do you like, what have you watched lately that you liked?
So I'm a huge fan of, I like Battlestar Galactica and like shows like that, and a huge fan of Lost. I think that kind of show where it's like the realm of like realism and sci-fi. I think it's pretty cool, or just really beautiful looking sci-fi shows.
Jenna, where would you go? I have some ideas, but you tell us.
No, please. I think I tend toward probably more grounded stuff. I obviously am interested in sort of the political world and government and politics. I feel like, shows like, I loved shows like Mad Men, I loved The Wire. I've just been watching Ozark right now, which is interesting because it's actually the way that when I watched The Wire, I wouldn't have called myself someone who likes cop shows, but it was obviously a lot more than that. I like the kind of thing that can explore a real world that, where you can do world building, but you are walking away from the show having learned something about the world that you live in that you didn't know going into it.
Okay. And Sarah?
I want to work on Jalysa's show. Sounds really fun. In terms of my own stuff, I really like sci-fi. I'm a big, I really like grounded sci-fi. I guess soft science fiction is technically the term, but just when you change like one aspect of the world and it changes the way that people interact with each other, and so you can just tell grounded stories about people's relationships, but they feel fresh and new because they're interacting differently because they live in a slightly different world. This sort of 5 minutes in the future kind of science fiction is my favorite.
Your book is essentially kind of.
It is very much.
Are you allowed to give us a quick picture of the book?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's set in a world where this seemingly supernatural event has happened, and because of it, if you do good things, you become more attractive. You do bad things, you become less attractive to the point where like your throat closes up and you die. So it's people are like, oh, that's God clearly, like. God exists. He's punishing people for being bad, and then it follows this shallow teenage girl. 10 years after this event has happened, who this is the world that she knows, and it's sort of her discovering that things aren't quite what they seem, and there's a little more of a gray area to good and evil than she thought.
I read it in a Word doc, and I loved it.
Thank you for you are thanked in the acknowledgments for your
so
help.
touched.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being one of my beta
no.
readers.
But it's really lovely. I think you should check it out. Hopefully next year.
January of 2018.
Okay,
and you
cool.
have copies to raffle off.
Yeah,
right?
and so I forgot to mention. I hope I didn't mention it earlier. I mentioned it earlier, but not recently. We do have galleys that we're going to give to some lucky Courier 12 attendees if you hashtag Courier 12 on Instagram or Twitter. So take a picture, tweet something, hashtag Courier 12, and you might just win a galleys of Sinless.
Yes, before it comes out.
Before
Yeah. Oh
it
yeah,
comes out.
that's what it's called. So I should probably mention
Yes.
that. I'm not very good.
Sinless,
I'm not very good
right.
at this publicity thing.
You're about
Right.
to get a call
Sinless.
from your publisher.
Yeah.
You're probably watching the live stream.
That's why they let you come, right? So I'm curious about the creative life of staff writers, because when you're writing a feature or writing a pilot, this is your baby, this is your game, but as a staff writer, you're kind of put in a box, and these are the rules and the characters in the world. So how do you bring your creativity, the things that interest you, into someone else's show?
It's almost like easier and harder at the same time because, especially on my show, the characters are so well developed already, and so you're just working within the realms of that backstory, which you're like, yeah, already a three-dimensional character. I don't have to worry about that stuff. And then it's like, I gotta worry about that stuff. So you're still allowed to be creative when it's your episode, right? You can pitch, hey, we haven't seen this character dynamic between these two individuals, and then that's the realm you can create in, taking those dynamics further. Like if you wanted to do like a Owen and Arizona story, which, we don't usually see those two together, that's where you get creative, and that's where you can tell your story your way. And then of course it's a collaborative environment, so you're always pitching ideas that are sometimes yours, and then other people pitch their ideas, and you're creating something together. So you feel like you have ownership over it, and you do to an extent. So I guess that's where you could be creative, when you're pitching aspects or you're pitching locations. In my episode, which actually has been shot and is in post-production right now, is unique because I got to use my military background, and that's all I'll say about that. So spoiler alert. But I got to bring in that aspect of something that I had that was unique on the staff, and be able to use these established characters, but in that setting.
So I was going to ask about Grays, because there's a lot of reasons it's been successful and been on the air for a long time. But one of the things that I think really works about it is, and this is a common format, is that you have a core group of characters who we've come to know and love over many, many years, and we know their relationships and how they think and what they say, and we can almost predict how they'll react in a situation. And yet in Grays, you can bring in a guest star who has a disease or an illness or got hurt, and so you bring that outside dynamic in. And is that a moment that you can also, on that show, sort of be you?
Oh, totally, yeah. Like who watched the premiere on Thursday? Okay, we got a couple. So there was a guest character that did not exist until like April or May, that we got to talk about in the room, how she would be and what she would be like. And that's where you get to create, like, this is a new character we haven't seen before. We're bringing them in for this reason, but who is that person? What do they look like? And so we got to put in that spin and pitch on her and like what her relationships would be. So that's a perfect example.
So what do you think?
It's interesting. I know you guys are both on really well-established shows at this point, and I have been lucky or unlucky enough to work on a bunch of first-year shows, which I think is actually a little bit different in that you are still, you have a pilot, and whoever's created it has obviously pitched a whole world and a vision, but there's so many things that you find when you get down to writing scripts and their new characters that they're sort of still forming. So in a way, it's like, I feel like on those shows, everyone is still sort of a part of who these people are, which is cool, and it's challenging. And but I think you get to be a little more creative maybe in that you're still defining these people. So there's a little bit of room for, what is this world, and like, is there room for this thing that I'm really interested in as part of this world? And the other thing I'll say is, like, even if you're on someone else's show, and like, Dynasty is not necessarily my natural wheelhouse. It's not what I would probably write if I went to go write my own pilot. But we're sort of trying to make a slightly more grounded soap, and so that's where I'm usually coming from. So it's like I'm probably pitching things that aren't heightened enough sometimes, but there's someone who's doing that, so that we're balancing each other in the room. And that's what I think. Like, I think rarely on any show is every member of the staff nailing the whole show. That's what the showrunner's for, and that's what the person who has the vision is for. But hopefully on your staff, I think you have people who are a mix of people who are good at different things. And so that can mean that different episodes are tricky for different reasons, because whoever's writing them has strengths and weaknesses, but hopefully as a whole, your staff kind of fills all the gaps.
Is there a dynamic where, if, for instance, you're sort of the go-to person for a character or a look? Is that a thing, or is that not a thing?
Not on shows I've worked on, but the biggest lesson I would say is every show is totally different. Again, having been lucky or unlucky enough to have had a bunch of different experiences in a relatively short time, they're all different, and all of them work very differently. So I'm sure there are shows that are that way. Okay. Just not the ones I've worked on.
Sarah?
Yeah. I mean, I'd second all of that. Like, I think for me, when my first staff job, it was like, it's a little bit of trial and error. It's like, I'm going to pitch a thing. Oh, no, that wasn't the right tone. Okay, I've learned from that. I'm going to just, you sort of just calibrate. Okay, I'm still me. I'm still pitching the things that I'm interested in and think are, would be good for the show, but also I'm learning more and more about what's going to be well received and what's not. Okay. So I think, like, over the course of time, you learn your bosses, you learn the show, and, you learn what you're good at and what your role is on that staff.
Okay. So can you guys give me a quick rundown of how you made the leap into the room? Like, what was the series of events that got you staffed? And, yeah.
So I got out of the military 2.5 years ago. As soon as I got to LA, I started taking meetings with people just to learn, inviting people out to coffee, working on my scripts, doing PA jobs for free, a lot of working for free. And then 6 months after I got to LA, through one of those meetings, the person, and I given her my resume, so make sure your resumes are up to date. She was like, yeah, I'll try to get you on a desk at ICM or a UTA or one of the agencies. And I was like, cool. And then didn't hear from her for 6 months. And then 6 months later, she's like, hey, hope you're doing all right. Heard that Shonda Rhimes was looking for a new second assistant. Give him your resume, gave you a plug. Good luck. And I was like, and then, like, no kidding, a week later, they brought me in for the first round of interviews with just the assistants. We hit it off. They really liked me. They were like, hey, if we choose you, you'll hear from us. If not, you won't hear anything. And I was like, great. And then, no kidding, a week later, they were like, so Shonda wants to meet you. And I was like, whoa. Came in and met Shonda. And a great thing about the military, you learn what's called military bearing, where, the crap can be hitting the fan, but your face is like this. And so I'm literally sitting across from Shonda in her office, and she's like saying these things, and my face is like this. But on the inside, I'm like, what do I do with my hands? and then she loved the fact that I had a top secret clearance because I could be discreet. And then I got the job with Shonda. I was her second assistant for a year, learned a lot of things really quickly. And then she read one of my samples. Said, you're too good of a writer to be my second assistant any longer. So instead of getting coffee for her, then I got moved to Gray's and got coffee for 13 other people. And it was like, yeah. And then got staffed this year because the new showrunner had read the same sample Shonda had read and then said, let's staff you.
Sweet. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, keeping in mind your extreme talent for discretion, what's life like working with Shonda? What's that? Everybody loves Shonda, right? So, like, what's that like?
Very busy.
Yeah.
She has 3 assistants. I was the second assistant after the exec, and it was just getting her coffee, going to her house, like doing errands and doing this. But at the same time, she likes to mentor people that she knows wants to be writers. And so in addition to making sure her schedule was good and doing her itinerary for whenever she went to New York every other week, she also let me go with her to the writers' rooms for Scandal and for Grey's and for Murder. I got to go to the table reads. I got to sit there and gawk at Viola Davis going, oh my God, we're in the same room. We're both eating this like catered food. What? And got to see the process. And she was really good at coming out of her office and just having conversations with us, talking about the state of entertainment and boys clubs and how she doesn't want to be in them and all of that. So it was both eye-opening, both terrifying, and just really fun at the same time.
Yeah, so Jenna, what's your story?
I graduated from USC, and because I had been in LA for 4 years, I interned a lot all through school. And I had an internship at ABC, at the network in drama development, and I ended up staying for like a year. So when I graduated, they obviously knew I was graduating, and there was a show called Eastwick, and they needed to staff up assistants. So I ended up working there as an assistant. And on that show, I met a writer, not my direct boss, but I met a writer, and her name is Rena Mamoon, who was consulting on the show. And the show ended up getting canceled, but she, having met her, I got a call from a friend of hers who had a show and was like, hey, I'm a friend of Rena's. She said, we should hire you. Do you want to be our writer's assistant? So I worked for Anna Fricke, her name's Anna Fricke, and Jeremy Carver on Being Human, which was on Sci-Fi, and I was their writer's assistant. And around the time that ended, Rena was developing and asked if I wanted to sort of come back and be her assistant through development. So it was really just the two of us in an office, talking through development, and she, to her, what she didn't have to do was totally collaborative and let me in on the whole process. And so she did a couple shows that didn't go, but when she ended up running Mistresses, she staffed me. So that was my first staff job. And then after Mistresses, we had sort of a long time between seasons. And so I ended up getting my first sort of writing job outside of that cocoon. And that was Allegiance. But I basically having a mentor who sees what gets you and also is in a position to champion you, I think is immensely helpful.
So it's been my experience that when those things work out, so one person calls one person and someone else calls you, it's because you did a really great job, and everybody's looking for people who work hard and do really great jobs, and they don't, and a good recommendation is way better than having to make a bunch of phone calls and take a bunch of meetings.
Yeah, and I would say that's especially true for TV. I don't really work in features, so I can't speak to it as much, but TV is very social. When I talk about writing not being the only important thing, you're in a room with your writing staff all day. So a lot of people if they get a show, they want to work with people they've worked with, their friends. I mean, because it's not just about going off in a room and writing a script and saying, here's the product. So I think that television is especially sort of relationship-based. So if you are not annoying and you work hard and you're good, those are all important things, usually. But yeah, I think so. I think the idea of having, that's the way I have found getting jobs, even more so than someone being, I'll send a resume over, right. In television at least, so.
So you, last year, were on Designated Survivor, Kiefer Sutherland, CBS, right? Or
ABC.
ABC, sorry. And that seems to be in your world, politics, government, and then now you're over at Dynasty. So that's got to be a really serious transition in terms of story style and mood and room and all that. How's that? Designated Survivor was definitely a world I was interested in, and we ended up getting to go to the White House, which is for sure the coolest perk I've ever had on a show. And it was very challenging in other ways, and there was a lot of turnover. So that was a different question. But Dynasty is being run by a good friend of mine who I've actually known
since I was an intern in the Dirty Sexy Money writer's room when I was still at school. And it's her first time running her own show. So when I had left Designated Survivor, I sort of wanted to maybe take time off, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then she called me and asked me if I would sort of come on Dynasty. And she's like, I think it's a long shot because I don't know if you want to staff, and also I don't know if you want to do Dynasty. But again, in the spirit of working with people you like and that you end up working with your friends, it was a kind of a thing where it was an opportunity to go do what I would want people to do for me if I got a show, which is I would want the people that I know and like and want to work with to come on my show. So I did that, and as I said, like, Dynasty is probably not my natural wheelhouse, but a lot of the things are the same across any show. So like producing, knowing how to be on set, going to post, being able to do those things, and she knew me and my sensibility, like, that we have enough overlap of sensibility and that I understand hers well enough that I'm sure plenty of things on the show where I'm like, oh, I might have done it this way. But I think that that's okay as long as you also can anticipate and know that this is how she's going to want to do it, and this is her show. So I think that has been a really interesting lesson, and because she's great and it's someone that I'm close to, it's been a great way to sort of shadow and see all the ugly parts also of being a showrunner. It's a really, really, really hard job. So I think that's been really rewarding in a way that's bigger than just what the content of the show is.
Okay. So Sarah, what was your
Well, as you know,
I know, but I'm asking you.
No, I'm saying you gave me my first writing job technically.
This is true.
It was $1,000 to to do a little polish pass on a feature. Right?
I had a job for MTV, and I needed help with some voice, and Sarah had just graduated, so I paid her $1,000 to touch up a script, and it's a really good script, and they were going to make it, and then the Writers Guild strike happened, and MTV killed their film division. So it didn't see the light of day. It was The Plebe was the name of the movie. Yeah, but that really didn't lead to anything.
It did, no, but it was an uncredited rewrite, but it was fun. And it was, it was a good experience. And
yeah, we
everything.
had a great time. And she was hopped up on painkillers all the time.
I did have knee surgery like the week before it was due.
She's all better now.
Did a lot of, but so, I graduated from USC, and then, I just couldn't get a job, and all my friends were getting jobs as PAs on things, and I was like, oh, I can't. It was just really hard. And then Jenna calls me up. I recommend knowing Jenna, and she's like, hey, I'm getting promoted over here at Eastwick. I'm filling my old position. Send me your resume. And she really fought for me to get that job, and I got it. I was like, oh my God, I'm the writer's PA on the show that I'm really excited about. This was, September of 2009 or something. Mm-hmm. And then the show premiered, and it was it did not light up the world. And, 4 months after, so.
Such a positive way. It was a huge, did not light up the world.
It was a great show. It was a really fun show. It just for whatever reason didn't land. And, so 4 months after getting the job, I was unemployed again. I was like, well, so I got to do this again. But, then I had a writer's PA on my resume. And I interned a whole bunch before that as well, but just none of those things had led to anything. So then, another friend of ours from school was working as the writer's assistant on Gossip Girl. They needed a new PA. She recommended me. I got that job. I was like, yes! And really quickly after I got that job, I was promoted to script coordinator. I was like, oh my God, I'm rising up the ranks. This is amazing. And then 5 years later, I was still a script coordinator. Which is, but it was an amazing experience to get. I got to go sort of from show to show. And the script coordinator is basically the person who proofreads the scripts and sends them out to people. And so, I worked on Gossip Girl. I worked on Jane the Virgin. I worked on a show called Witches of East End, they gave me so after working there for a season, I sent my script to the showrunner. She liked it enough to give me a freelance. That was a really amazing experience with my first script. And then that show got canceled. And then, from there I ended up at Arrow as the script coordinator. And then right after I started at Arrow, the book sold. And that sort of began this sort of snowball effect of I optioned a pilot, and all these sort of cool things started happening. And I got a call from, I had worked with Jenna on Mistresses as I had been the script coordinator when she was a writer, and one of the writers on Mistresses called me up and said, like, hey, like, are you available? Will you come be a staff writer over here? So
Who was it?
Oh, it was Josh Reams.
Just make sure in case he watches it, he knows that you.
Josh Reams, if you're watching this, you're
credit.
great. Everyone, Josh Reams is great. And so I went over there, did a year on staff there, and then from there went back to Arrow on staff. So it was sort of a long roundabout thing, but
persistent.
But and I was just I think that I was just very lucky to get that job early on, to meet the right people who helped me get onto other shows, and then it's if you can get there, it's just kind of
right.
You just got to stick it out a little bit. So.
And Jenna, given what you said about you're sort of this reluctant writer, Sarah's, to my knowledge, is completely the opposite. I mean, never stops writing, like all the time. And so in the middle of like this got canceled, I'm waiting for this job. You were still writing.
But that is the nice thing about the job that I had as a script coordinator. You do have some downtime during the day, and it was like, okay, great. I'll write the script. I'll write this novel. So.
So tell us about like working in the superhero world. I mean, were you always like sort of a fan of superheroes?
I'm a huge sci-fi fan.
Okay.
So there's a lot of sort of overlap in terms of the subject material you get to be writing about. And it's nice because DC just has this giant catalog of characters, and obviously some of them are you'll call and you'll be like, oh no, that person's tied up in features, so you can't use everybody, but you do. There is all these years of backstory and these characters that are really fun to explore, and the people that I work with are just the best people. I really like my whole crew of people I work with.
Could you see yourself doing more superhero work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's really fun.
Because it's kind of been like successful.
Yeah, I mean,
a little bit.
Just a little.
People are sort of watching
I guess it's sort of breaking out of the indie world a little bit.
Yeah. Cool. So
I like it.
And you know all about fake arrows now, right?
I do. Oh, yes, this was the story I was telling, but I didn't know for the longest time that the arrows that they're shooting on screen were CGI, which obviously you're not going to just shoot an actual arrow on set, and I had never thought about it. Everyone made fun of me. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So you learn, right?
Yes.
So one more question for you. So you're adapting a book for Lionsgate, which is awesome.
Yes.
Congratulations. And the novel is coming out, and you're a staff writer on a show. Mm-hmm. So jumping between these, so we talked about prose. Jenna loves prose. Are you a prose writer at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So but I can't. I've really lost the ability to write long prose because I'm so efficient and economical now as a screenwriter, as a feature writer, right? Everything is dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
Has it been an interesting bump around for you?
I definitely have had to be like, okay, I need to sit and read a book before I just to get back in that. Okay, this is how you use adjectives. This is how just because it's just you kind of forget. Adverbs. What are adverbs?
Exactly. We don't talk about them.
But it's and just to get the sense of like this is how you write inside the mind of your main character.
Right.
Because if you're writing books, you're all of the roles. You're the director, you're the actors, you're everybody. So
are there days when you're working on all three? Or do you segment it in terms of today's?
I try to work on only 2 things at once.
Okay.
So I try to do a draft of a thing and then finish that and send it off and then start something.
That's what I always did. So while I was out for notes, I would start the next thing,
Yes.
and then you keep that cycle going of hopefully
It's a good cycle.
be able to write during the notes acquisition period.
Yes, because the notes acquisition always takes,
Yeah, and it can't take long enough for me. I'm like, take your time.
Resting on your laurels is the best part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I got the check, right?
Yeah.
So take your time.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to ask before we get to some questions from the audience, and this is for all of you, we were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to have, it was last year maybe, Howard Rodman, the then president of the Writers Guild, and he taught at USC where we were. Great guy, and he talked a lot about diversity in the business, female representation in the business, and I think there's this portrait of television that it's really great, we've made the most progress there, and which is probably true, but also that the studios the companies aren't really giving us accurate information in terms of representation and how. So what is the view on the ground in television now for women, and how does it look?
It's better, but there's still a long way to go. I'm gonna steal from Sam from Brown Girls what she said earlier today. There are 550 shows on the air, and only 10 of them would count as diverse, like in the true sense. But I'm optimistic because I'm a raging optimist, and this is at least an environment where we can keep pushing it, and it doesn't have to be just a trend. It could be change. And so, for example, at Shondaland, Shonda has mandated at least 50% of all directors for the shows, all background actors for the shows, and all writers will be women, and at least 30% of color to reflect our society. And at first she was kind of pushing back against having to do that herself, but then after her managing directors continuously, like her producing directors continued to like kind of just hire their friends, which were white guys, because like if you're a white guy, it makes sense that you'll have white guy friends. When they kept doing it, she was like, all right, I hate that I have to do this, but I have to do this. So she mandated. And from there we've had great success stories for first-time directors. Like the first-time director for my episode was a female Norwegian director who had never done a U.S. production, and maybe 10 years ago she never would have, but she made a beautiful episode, and it was her first time directing. Technically, Ava DuVernay got her start on Scandal. Had she not gotten that, who knows how long her trajectory would have been. So it sucks that we have to mandate this, but in front of and behind the camera, it's something we have to mandate until it's just natural.
What do you guys think?
I am working for my first female showrunner since the first show I worked on.
And that's been how long?
I worked on 4 shows in between. So I would say that it's also the most diverse staff I've ever worked on, both in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity. Like it's different. I've worked certainly. I think one of the sort of tricky things about especially female representation in the room is I've been in rooms that have a number of female writers or even half female, but everyone who's upper level and in charge is male. And so when you're female in the room, and especially if you're a junior writer, there's a lot of things conspiring against you speaking in the room, which is one, that you're junior, and two, so you feel like you should sort of be seen and not heard sometimes a little bit, and also that you're a woman. And so I've definitely had that thing where you get pushback if you speak up. And so I think that diversity where everyone who's in charge is a white guy is not real diversity.
True diversity.
Yeah. But I think it's getting better. I will say, like, in terms of directors, like, one thing you hear a lot when you're pushing for female directors is that none of them are available. No one's available. They're all working. And again, that's because I think people are less willing to take a chance on a first-time or an inexperienced female director. And when female directors screw up, which they do because everyone screws up when they first start, I don't think they get as much slack. So I think that has been, even on this show, where we have, of our 9 writers, 6 of them I think are women, it's been hard for us to get a lot of female directors. So it's definitely not there, but I think it is getting better. But it's definitely still an issue, and like I think Shondaland is probably far ahead what a lot of the industry is in terms of that kind of thing.
Yeah. I've been told this is very uncommon. Every show I've worked on has had at least one female executive producer, and I do think that I have really appreciated the women who have been supporting me, and also the feminist men who have been, I think that having women in those positions of power does a lot for the people who are coming up behind. And there's now these diversity programs that are really amazing at helping to solve the problem in terms of the diversity side of it. But they're still relatively new, and so a lot of the people coming out of them are still relatively junior. So I do think it's just I think it's going to just take a little bit more time to get more women and more people of color into those higher level positions so that they can then be supporting the people coming in after them.
Right. So in the Brown Girls panel, there was a bit of discussion about creating characters. So like as you're on shows, right? And we know Shonda is very proactive in creating people of color in her roles and for characters. But is this a conversation that you've had on your shows? Like, can this person not be white? Do they have to be white? Like, is this something that comes up?
Yes, I've been on shows where like I'm the one where you're asking it, and like because no one else, like because it's not coming up and because everyone's white. But also the show that I'm on right now is an update of Dynasty, and so one of the things that have changed is that there are like half the cast is black. So it's different, but now, and like also what that brings up is when we tell stories with these characters, we have to also be mindful of like the fact that every story we tell, like there's a drama level where you're like, well, it's all about love triangles and it's all about, that's what soap, the engine of soap, right? But those things mean something. For example, when you have a love triangle that's two black men and a white girl, like that, there's a lot of like context to unpack in that. So I think that that's one of the things that on this show in particular we've been looking at, which is like making sure that we want to tell the best story, but also be mindful of like the stories we tell, what do they say in the larger world and like in a larger context, which I think is something that I think is as important. Like I don't believe that drama exists outside of social context. So that to me is something that like a good show has to take that stuff into account.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone feels that way, and I'm sure everyone doesn't, but that's one of the things that we're trying to be really conscious of.
Yeah, and I think sometimes even when you are a woman writing about women or a person of color writing about people of color, that there's a certain narrative that is just sort of ingrained in our culture, and I think you have to sort of look at the character and be like, am I writing this woman in a way that is stereotypical? Am I bucking those stereotypes in a good way or a bad way? And I think it's just, you have to be more mindful of it. And that's,
Great. Well, now we've come to the moment when we'd like to let these fine folks ask some questions of you. So tell us your name and fire away.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm the kind of person who I am kind of not like the quickest writer. It takes a little bit to get stuff out of me. I'm a little bit, but like, it's always been really fun for me, and something that I'm worried about thinking of it as because for a long time I didn't think of writing as something that I could do professionally because it's so fun, and like there's this thing where like I don't know how to balance that, and like it's always been my hobby, but then like in the last year I've been like, no, I have to write. So how do you balance being in a room working as a job with like bosses and like kind of an office structure and still having fun with writing and keeping the joy in it without like because sometimes working like on certain assignments or stuff like that, it takes the joy out of what you're doing?
That's a really good question.
Never takes it completely out. So yeah, you'll get stuck in the work. Like, hey, we start prepping this script next week and it's not written yet. So I mean, you'll get caught up in it. But this actually happened to me on Friday, where we were doing something with the script, or we're going back on it, and they were like, hey, we need you to rewatch the premiere episode. And so it was me and another staff writer, and we were like, okay. Oh, shoot, we get to watch TV as a job? Man, that's so hard. And then, like, that's where the fun came back. Like, we get to watch TV as a job. Like, that is, when you realize that, you get to write TV, you get to talk about stories, the fun is there. Like, when you're breaking story and you in the room are, like, firing on all cylinders, and they're like, this person should do this, and then, oh, you find out they're sleeping together, and then you're just like, you realize, oh, I'm getting paid WJ minimum for this? This is fantastic. And that's where you find the fun. So there are moments where it's just work because it's hard work and you got to get it out. And you have 24 to 16 to 10 episodes, but they are due at this point, and you just concentrate on it. But then there'll be moments like that where you just realize I'm doing the thing that I love and I'm getting paid to do it. There's no more working the 9-to-5 job and then writing on the weekends. You can write as your job. And then I think that's where the innate joy comes in, and it won't stop being fun for you. It'll keep going. At least it's fun for me.
I feel like for me, there's always the initial like, oh, like once you know like you have to do this, you're like, oh, I have to sit down and do this. And it's like once you get over that like hump of like forcing yourself to do it, when you're in it, for me, it's like it starts to become joyful again. It's like it's just that part of
resistance at
the resistance of
beginning.
yes, which I'm sure when you're writing for class or when you're writing, it's just the part where you're getting into it is always the hardest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't speak to joy. So.
Yeah, we're not going to let Jenna talk about happiness. So.
Next.
We could talk outlines.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm pretending I'm taller than I am currently. So I'm hopefully eventually going to be a screenwriter or TV writer.
You
Sorry,
will.
guys. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to be. So my question is mostly for Jalysa, but also you two can answer it or answer like the inverse of it. But what is it like coming into a writer's room that is so well developed? Because you came in, seasons that are in double digits.
Yeah.
Like, what is that like?
So this year we actually had half
Thank you.
turnaround for our staff for some other reasons that I won't say. So I was coming in with new people, with at least half new people. We hired like 4 new staff writers this season. And I was kind of like the one, again, a unicorn. I straddled both because I knew the old writers as an assistant, but then also was technically a new writer. And it was okay. Our showrunner, Krista Vernoff, is amazing. She's really good at developing people. And just from the get-go, we were the room together. And like those higher level writers, even though they've been writing on the show for years and know the show in and out, were really good about listening to new ideas because we were going in a different direction this season per Krista. She wanted to take Grace back to being the romantic comedy that it was for the first 6 seasons. And so that required new voices and new ideas. And that's the thing that the new people brought. And so as long as we felt that and internalized that, then it didn't feel so daunting to write for Meredith Grey. And so we just kept that idea, what's the new thing we can bring in? Because we were brought in for a reason, and you kind of just stick to that and then know, all right, come with new ideas. I can do that. I come up with ideas all the time. And so you just kind of focus on that, and then that'll keep the fear down, but only so slightly.
I'll say I haven't worked on anything that's run nearly as long as Gray's, but if you can get in as the writer's assistant, as just I was the script coordinator, and they just like let me sit in the room and just like if you can just watch the room and how it works, and that's just I can't tell you how helpful that is.
Totally.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh, hey, everybody. My question is for Jalysa. You might have to raise it up a little bit. Because I'm also a veteran, so I was interested to hear that you are, because I haven't met a lot of writers that are veterans, honestly. So I was wondering if you knew any resources. You're Air Force, you said?
Yep.
I was Marine Corps, so we're a little different. But either way, screenwriting is more of a passion. I'm a journalist as well. Just have you run into any resources, or if not, what do you use, or how do you use your background to help you?
We do actually have resources. I didn't know this as well. There's a group called the Veterans in Film and Television. Phenomenal group. Actually, when I first got to LA, I actually, by chance, through one of my professors from UCR, got in with the United States Veterans Artists Alliance. And they're another phenomenal group as well. They have a writing group, like a monthly writing group where we meet once a week or once a month, and it's just straight vets who are writers. And like they were a phenomenal resource, and I can, if you want to come see me afterwards, I can give you all the contact people, and if you're ever in LA, stop by. There's a...
I was stationed in Pendleton, so I know the whole region pretty well.
Yeah. So like there's actually a lot of veterans working in the entertainment industry, and once you get connected to one, they usually connect you to the rest. So, and then the WGF, the Writers Guild Foundation, has a vet writing program that I actually did, and they are a phenomenal resource as well.
Can I just find you a pen and paper after this?
Oh, yeah, totally.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much.
So yeah, strong vet community. I mean, we're still small comparative to the rest of Hollywood, but we're there. For sure.
I don't mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your service, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Do we have time for another question? I think, yeah.
Hi, my name is Aaron Davis. I am a writer. I've written both for existing TV series on spec, and then I've also just wrote my first pilot episode. Long-term goals, I would like to create my own shows and executive produce and show run them. What is your advice as far as what trajectory I should put myself on career-wise? Should I try to put myself in a writer's room to experience that, or should I focus on just writing new material constantly?
If you want to run your own show, you need to work on shows. No one will let you run your own show usually because it's a lot of money that they're trusting you with unless you have a lot of experience. So I know I have worked with people who came from other things or had written features and wrote a show, and especially in network, but almost always, because again, it's a lot of money, they will pair you with an experienced showrunner who knows what they're doing. So if you want that person to be you, I would work on shows, try to get staffed, and work your way up that way. Because I have to say, like, one of the things I have learned is that it's a crazy hard job, and there's so much of it that's not about writing at all, that you only really find out. And by the way, I've now worked with a few first-time showrunners. There's a lot of things, people who had a lot of experience writing and worked their way up, there's a lot of things that you don't find out until you are a showrunner. But I would say that if you want to get to that place, then I would staff and get a lot of experience on shows.
Thank you.
Interning, being writer's assistant, writer's PA. Those are the jobs that you want to be working towards.
How do you find PA positions? I know that's the second question, but.
You meet people.
Yeah, you meet.
Yeah. Like legit, and it's not like a nepotism thing. It's just it's a social thing. People want to work with people they think are cool. So, are you a student?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, just whatever. If you know people who work in the industry, like talk to those people. I mean, it really starts with your hot network, which is the people who you know who can put you in touch that way, and then come to these, meet the panelists, meet the people, be a cool person. My number one rule for my UCR program is don't be an asshole. But like you would be surprised how many people don't know that and come off like, oh, I just want to use you to get where I'm at. Just offer to take people to coffee without any like expectations, and then I think that works the best.
Sure. I would say one of the best advice I got was when I interviewed for my first job out of school, which is that when you're in school and all the way through school, it's oriented toward what are you learning and what are you taking away from it, and even internships are that way. And I think the last thing that a lot of people want to hear when they're hiring, for example, a writer's PA is like, I'm here so I can be a showrunner. Like, what people want to know is like, I'm here so that I can help this show. Like, I want to do anything I can to make this show run smoothly. But I do think that the mistake a lot of people make when they're trying to start is a sense of like, I'm doing this so that I can get here. Which is, again, it's the same thing where it's like, when you are staffed on a show, generally what that showrunner needs is someone, or is a staff of people who can mimic their voice, not that you're saying, well, this is my unique voice, which, it's just different. It's different from creating your own material. And in the same way that I think starting out is different from where you end up. So I would say that was some of the best advice I got, which is that you sort of, in order to get those things in terms of being cool and like what gets people in the door is this sense of I'm bringing in someone who I think will make my life easier, not sort of be using me for.
Who's going to hassle
Yeah.
me to read scripts, and who's going to hassle me to,
Yeah. And like a showrunner's job is really, really hard. So if you can be the person that makes their life less stressful, you become valuable to them.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm an aspiring TV writer, and this is another like advice-based question. And I know that we have to kind of get moving, but if you guys just had some quick like nose to the grindstone tips of advice about becoming an assistant and really just like how you guys showed that you had this really strong work ethic in those writers' rooms and they were able to get you those staff writing positions.
What got me my staff writing position was my script. So even when you're getting coffee, even when you have 12 to 14 hour days where you're not doing anything writing related, always be writing. Always be working on your samples, getting them better, making them uniquely you and your voice, and originals. Like, yes, people still take specs, but everyone wants to see an original, at least for staff. Unless you're doing like a contest or one of the writing programs, everybody wants to see originals. So work on your material whenever you can, because again, you never know when that opportunity might come for someone in an important position to read your work and then open up a door for you. So that's probably and then don't be an asshole.
Do you mean like how to be a good assistant, like how to be a good assistant?
Yeah,
or?
and just get you on that like right path to like opening up, a position for you.
I think if you're someone who, one, it's like be the person who's there early, be the person who stays late. But also I think if you show as an assistant, if you're good at anticipating what will be needed, if you show that you get it, if you're able to anticipate what's going to be needed, you're showing that you're watching and that you understand how the show works, like how the mechanics work. And if you're someone who's paying attention and who gets it, that's one of the biggest things. Like that's what someone's going to be like, I like you, like you get it and you get me, so like let me see what you're about. I think is one of the biggest things. Like it's a lot of it comes from like, do you get along as a person, and like do you get it, sort of.
Yeah, I would say befriend each other, pull each other up. My friend from college got me my first job, and just write as much as you can. I think I wrote 10 pilots before I wrote one that anyone liked. So, just you're gonna think like, oh, this is great. Why isn't it lighting up the world? And you just gotta write another one, and maybe another one after that, and like you just gotta be willing to just keep plugging away at it.
Thank you.
Well, this has been really special. Thank you for coming to Chicago to be with us. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.